Good morning, a warm welcome to each one of you for this morning virtual service. I greet you all in the matchless name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Before we begin, let us look to the Lord in prayer. Now may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable unto you, our rock and redeemer. Amen. Today we are living in a very challenging situation with the emerging pandemic virus. Many of us are facing inconveniences, frustrations, going through mental trauma and various crises in our life. And many news reporters are reporting and creating anxiety and worry for the future and our well-being. Every success and achievements of man seems to be failure in front of this pandemic virus. On the other side, children, youth and adults are afflicted by the current crisis in the terms of mental and physical health, sports and extracurricular activities, learning and professional developments. This pandemic has taught us that we cannot take anything for granted, either our life or the resources we own. Nothing is going to help us. Millions have lost their lives due to this virus, and many have lost their hope and assurance in God. But this morning, I would like to bring you hope and assurance from our living God, who has promised us that He will never leave us nor forsake us. I am reminded of two biblical characters. One is Joseph and Samson, who were very young and were blessed by God at every difficult time and situations at their life. Let us ponder a while on both the characters and try to learn how to face the difficult situations of our life. Based on the lives of these biblical characters, Joseph and Samson, I have entitled my sermon as Stay Connected with God. When we try to compare and look at the lives of Joseph and Samson, these two were the most fascinating stories in the Bible. We see Joseph was a winner, though Joseph's early life was miserable and unfortunate, and he was hated by his own brothers, and he was thrown into a pit. He was sold into slavery. He was separated from his family for nearly about 20 to 22 years. Some of the biblical scholars say that Joseph stayed in jail for nearly 10 years. Joseph was forsaken by his family, forgotten by his friends, and frustrated by his failures. But for Samson, everything was going good at the initial period for him. He was a product of a miracle birth, raised by godly parents and given supernatural power by God. Yet he failed miserably because of his ignorance. But Samson was dependent upon his own strength and did not rely and pray to God. He dishonored God by marrying from a pagan religion, touching the dead and eating honey from the remains of life, which was restricted conditions in his life. The only time we read of Samson praying is found when he was in trouble. He refused to live by God's word, and he lived only for 40 years. Joseph, on the other side, had a very good connection with God. He prayed to God, and he was always dependent on God at every time and conditions of his life. He was not strong physically as Samson was, but he had a great spiritual strength. He lived 110 years, which was thrice of Samson's life. Joseph was a man of good character. When confronted with Potiphar's wife, his refusal sent him to jail for many years, but Joseph stood firm on his character. He remained faithful to himself and God. Samson was a man of great strength, but of weak character. Samson had a weakness when it came to women. He would fall easily into the traps. First, his wife seduced him to give him the answer to the riddle. Then the prostitute was used as a bait to catch Samson. And finally, Delilah was used to finish Samson. Samson was chosen by God to deliver Israel from the Philistines, but he died in dishonor as a captive of Philistines because he fell for the trap and seductions of beautiful women. Samson sought revenge, but Joseph prayed for those who hurt him. Samson was motivated by greed, whereas Joseph worked hard. He honored God, Potiphar and his wife, as well as himself with his response. When he became Pharaoh's prime minister, he not only saved Egypt from famine, he saved his family and the Jewish nation from death. Joseph fulfilled God's purpose for his life through his obedience, and also he extended forgiveness to those who harmed him. Similarly, we all may fail in our character and our achievements and fall into the traps of this world and worldly desires. When we are disconnected with God, when we rely upon our own strength, our resources, when we don't ask God for His guidance, we all will miss our reward from God and lose our position of honor and blessing. We can find few examples from Bible which are mentioned. Firstly, we see the wisest king Solomon who ever lived was brought down by idolatry and disobedience. Secondly, we see Judas, a chosen disciple of Jesus Christ, betrayed him because of his greed. And thirdly, we can also see the King Saul, who was the first king of Israel and a prophet, missed the point because of his disobedience. And lastly, we can see Queen Vashti lost her queenship because of her arrogance. From the life example of Joseph and Samson, I would like to share 4 points this morning to each one of us. First thing we need to know is God is always with all of us. Repeatedly in the Bible, it is mentioned that God was always with Joseph. In everything Joseph faced, we are told that God was with him. Firstly, we can see he was with Joseph in his servitude. Even though he was a slave, he did not murmur or keep on complaining God that his life is going through a turmoil or a disaster or a time of tribulation. He did not complain to God, but he served Potiphar honestly and did the best job he could do. What a lesson to learn from this. If anyone of you expect to rule someone or the other, then you must first learn to serve. You will never be over until you first learn to be under someone. Joseph was learning about humility in this process. And secondly, we can see God was with him in seduction. Potiphar's wife tried everything in her power to seduce Joseph, but he stood strong in the Lord and fended off her advances. God was teaching Joseph that no price would be placed on a clean conscience. God was teaching Joseph a lesson in purity and in self-control. And thirdly, we can see that God was with him in suffering. Even when Joseph was forced to endure the shame of a false imprisonment, which he has not committed a crime for, God was with him and blessed him. You know that God turned tragedy, temptation, torment and trouble into great triumph. God brought all Joseph's dream into practicality, teaching Joseph and us lessons to learn from his life. Joseph never quit on the Lord. He never stopped trusting Him. He never stopped dreaming until the Lord brought to pass everything in his life that God wanted to do with him. As a result, he was a winner. In a nutshell, Joseph had experienced God's presence and protection in the midst of several adversities and uncertainties in his life. Second point I would like to share with you is God protects us in the midst of our troubles. Though Joseph was thrown into a pit, sold as a slave, accused of raping Potiphar's wife, and was imprisoned in a jail, in the midst of all these dangers and adversities, God protected him because of his faithfulness and obedience and his dependency on God and his connectivity with God, because he was always connected with God. Therefore, God helped him and protected him from every harm and dangers in his life. Because Joseph remained faithful to God instead of complaining, embracing the culture of people of Egypt. Joseph was handsome, intelligent, and a born leader. No wonder Potiphar's wife became infatuated and tried to seduce him, but he did not, fell into the trap. Like Potiphar's wife, Satan in this world is behind you and me to get us into the trap. Be careful and watch over yourself and be faithful and obedient to God. Do not worry, because God is faithful and He will not let us to be tempted beyond what we can bear, as it is written in the 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 13. Third point, stay connected with God and He will lift you up. God's purpose for our lives is a way greater than our biggest mistakes we have committed. Many of us have gone through hard times in our life, but we must all realize that each problem we face teach us a new lesson that we should learn from the past mistakes we have committed. Though not immediately, but we realize why things went wrong in our life and why we have to go through that problem. Samson failed to stay connected with God. He was dependent upon his own strength rather depending upon God's guidance and his blessings. Joseph, on the other hand, was always seeking God's guidance. Therefore, God lifted Joseph and he was promoted to the highest rank of being the Prime Minister of Egypt. And he was given bigger role and responsibilities to take care of the people of Egypt and surrounding areas because of his good character and wisdom. Success does not happen overnight. Promotion and true prosperity will not come through your laziness, but it will come through hard work and being fair in all of your dealings, as Joseph. Just like Joseph, you need to be more diligent and pursue a relationship with God. Be faithful and patient and obedient. In due time, you will see how God will work all things out for good to those who love Him and stay connected with Him. Don't get disconnected. If you are disconnected with Him, your blessings will be disconnected from Him. Fourth point I would like to share is use your strength and talent for God's glory. Be a diligent, honest and productive worker like Joseph. Joseph at his 17, he was tending the flocks with his brother. As a slave, he worked hard in Potiphar's house. Joseph was able to make sure that what he was doing was best, especially in managing the food crisis in Egypt when he became the Prime Minister. The message is quite simple to each one of us this morning. Always do your best. It may be your studies, it may be your sports, your profession, and at your workplace. Give your best and you will receive your reward by God. Samson, the strongest man in the Bible, dishonored God, and he forgot that strength was given to him from God. We must remember that his strength comes from God. Without God, he is as strong as ordinary man. Similarly, whatever we have, the strength we have, the knowledge we have, the wisdom we have, the resources we own, is everything given by God. Therefore, let us not depend upon our own worldly strength, but let us depend upon godly strength. You and I are also given immense strength and talents by God. Though we may not be strong as Samson and not as wise as Joseph, but everyone has been blessed with unique strengths that we can use for the glory of God. No matter who you are, what age group you belong, or what status of your life may be, you have a gift from God and that you can use. Never ever commit the mistake of thinking that you are nothing, you can't do anything, or you can't contribute anything for others or for your church or your family. We all have different strengths. It could be writing, playing music, singing, encouraging one another, teaching, preaching, dancing, drawing, painting, helping in making the presentation of your church, greeting people with smile as they come into the church. Don't underestimate the small things that you can do for other people and God, because those same small thing can potentially occupy the biggest space in the hearts of the people whom you have helped. Therefore, offer your life and strength to God right now, this morning. Offer it while you are still young. Don't wait until you are old and can't even carry yourself to the church service. The time is now that you use your strength for the glory of God. It is not the gift that God is given by God to you is evil, but it is the character you carry decides your life. I want to repeat this sentence. It is not the gift that is given by God to you is It is the character you carry, it decides your life. You can impart or exchange your gifts, but not the character. God is much concerned about your character and not your gifts. In conclusion, I want all of us to look at the lives of both Samson and Joseph, how they began their life. When God chose them, God anointed them to do great things for the people of Israelites. Because of poor choices, changed the course of Samson's life to destruction, and the wise decisions kept Joseph in God's perfect will even when it appeared to be a disaster. Just like Samson and Joseph, you and I have choices to make each day in our life. You do not have to fall into the trap of this world and its desires. Take control of your lives and stay connected with God. Ask God for knowledge, wisdom, understanding, and discernment in your lives to monitor your ways and stay away from the lures of lust and be honest to God, and He will reward you in the due time. Be prepared to face any situations that arise. Utilize the time in this pandemic, train your mind and body to flee from the trouble and temptations of this world. Give your best out of you. Like Joseph, stay connected with God, pray, depend, and ask for His guidance. May God bless you all.